Mr. Culberson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, I've got two areas I wanted to ask about, and then I know we're going to have a second round. Airline Pilots Associations have brought to my attention that that CBP and its budget proposal is attempting to establish a pre-clearance facility at the Abu Dhabi International Airport in the United Arab Emirates. Yet I'm aware of unfortunately, the agency, DHS, has not been fully funding facilities here in the United States, and I understand also from the Pilots Association that no U.S. airline even serves Abu Dhabi. Could you please talk to us about why you would expand a pre-clearance facility in a foreign airport benefiting foreign airlines when you're short of money, allegedly, and no U.S. airline even serves that airport, and you're not fully staffing, for example, the facility at the Houston Intercontinental Airport and other airports in the United States?
Well, what's
the logic?
Yes.
And what authority?
The strategic goal we have in mind is to push borders out, because our ability to minimize risk is maximized the further out we can go. It just gives us one more layer. This is in the initial stages of negotiation. It would be a reimbursable agreement. In other words, the U.S. taxpayer would not be paying for it. But it would allow us, for the first time in the Middle East, where we have a keen interest in making sure the traveling public is safe, to try this out. There are several other countries that are interested in doing the same thing. But again, from a security strategy perspective, moving the borders out, as well as maintaining what we have here, makes all the sense in the world.
And you say it's zero cost to U.S. taxpayers?
It would be a reimbursability agreement.
At zero cost?
Yes, that's reimbursable.
Yeah, but that's the goal, is to make it zero cost. Well, we have an urgent need for additional agents at facilities, for example, at the Houston Airport. I know others around the country, and I understand what you're saying about reimbursable and pushing the borders out. What can you tell us about increasing the staffing levels at, for example, the facilities at Houston and other airports, so that there's not delay? It causes people to miss flights when a flight's coming in from an international its international origin, lands in Houston, transfers to another flight going overseas. You guys have downsized the staffing levels, and it's causing a lot of folks to miss flights.
Well, we haven't downsized staffing levels. The fact is the traveling public has increased, and we haven't increased staffing levels. What the President is requesting in the budget is the ability to add 3,400 more CBP officers for the airports and the land ports. 1,600 to be paid for by appropriation, the remainder by an increase in the immigration user fee and the COBRA fee, a $2 increase, which would cover the cost of that. We believe we have the capacity to bring on board, train, and deploy that significant number within FY14. That will go a long way, based on our calculations and assessment, to mitigating lines. We also have global entry and pre-check to expedite travelers, and we have piloted, I actually think one of the Houston airports was part of the pilot, express check as well as one-stop check to facilitate the movement of passengers.
Right. When a congressional statute, moving on to another subject I want to ask you about, if Congress enacts a law that uses the word shall, what does shall mean?
Shall means shall.
Is there any discretion, or, I mean, if the law says shall, what options does that give a federal agency? I mean, shall means shall. You have to do it.
Well,
it means shall. That's mandatory, right?
Well, it is intended to be mandatory. However, when it says shall and subsequently doesn't appropriate the money to meet the shall, you have a difficult choice to make. Do you violate the appropriations that you were given, and do you violate those laws, or do you violate the underlying laws? So every time we have a ceiling floor or a bed level or what have you, in my view, that means shall, subject to appropriations.
Well, and if you, for example, have got two laws, one that says you shall build a new office building or shall expand headquarters, and another law that says you shall protect public safety when you're short of money. Which one of those would you do first?
Well, obviously public safety is always our number one priority.
So particularly if it's got a shall, it's not optional.
It's just, we were founded in the response to 9/11, and public safety is our number one goal. But if you look at, and I think you're getting to, why is there money in here for a headquarters for DHS? Our ability to connect the dots and to work in an integrated fashion is facilitated by having a headquarters where people can actually meet and talk with each other. We're in 50-plus buildings in the National Capital Region. So to do our best work, ultimately, we're going to need a headquarters.
If shall is not optional, therefore, you've got to make choices. You don't have enough money to do everything on your plate, and your top priority is protecting public safety. Would Department of Homeland Security be doing its job if ICE agents released onto the street a criminal who was arrested by local law enforcement authorities, who was arrested for assault, sexual assault, drug dealing, or other crimes, and ICE has a mandatory responsibility to hold those people pending determination of their final disposition? What would ICE would Department of Homeland Security be doing its job if they released criminals who had been arrested for assault or other violent crimes in the light of a statute that says they shall be held for removal proceedings?
Well, two things. One, there were a handful of level ones released. That was a mistake, but nonetheless, it was a mistake made because, and you look at the underlying facts of each arrest, and you look at the actual detainee, they were determined not to be a danger to public safety. The President's budget for ICE provides for the detention beds for all those who are mandatory detainees.
If I may, excuse me for interrupting, because our time is limited and the chairman's been very generous, but you say if the agents determine they're not a threat to public safety, I don't see that determination in the statute. The law that mandates that ICE hold these folks is Title 8, Section 1225 of the United States Code, and I don't see a determination that they're a threat to public safety. The statute's very clear that a ICE agent determines, quoting from the statute, that an alien seeking admission is not clearly and beyond a doubt entitled to be admitted. The alien shall be detained for a removal proceeding. There's nothing about a determination of public safety. That's not optional. That's mandatory.
Well,
you're in violation of the law and have endangered the safety of the people of the United States that you're sworn to protect by releasing these dangerous criminals.
Well, I think we have to be very careful in our language here, Representative. The individuals that were released by ICE were not released into the general population per se. They were put in an alternative to detention. We believe that alternatives to detention have become much better than they were years ago, and by the way, are more cost-effective and efficient. If a mistake was made on a particular release, we will deal with that and with the agent or agents involved with that mistake.
So a release that in this case you admit that was a mistake, and I'm glad to hear you say that. So you agree that that's a mandatory obligation on the part of ICE. The statute's very clear. The alien shall be detained for removal proceedings. That's not optional.
Well, again, with respect to how we manage the beds, right? I think Representative Price has it right. We ought to be detaining according to our priorities, according to public safety threats, level of offense, and the like. So according to individual, not an arbitrary bed number.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time.
Mr. Culberson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Napolitano, first I want to thank you for your admission that that was a mistake to release those individuals that had committed a crime and endangered the public. I know the American people appreciate that. The Congress appreciates it. And I thank you also. If we could here today, I think it would be very helpful to make sure that everyone listening and our immigration officers out there listening know that they're hearing it from you and from the Congress, that when the law says shall, that's not optional, right?
I think we've already had that discussion.
No, I just want to thank you. I want to make sure I understand clearly that when you're particularly talking about Title 8, Section 1225, you agree that's not optional.
Well, you are absolutely right. The statute uses shall, but as I further explained, sometimes you have shall, but there's no way to do the shall because the resources haven't been made available.
Right.
And I think that needs to be taken into account.
But for the officer in the street who's sworn, took an oath to enforce the law and protect the public, this statute says shall, and that's not optional, correct?
Well, and the safety of the community is something that always needs to be taken into account.
That's that top priority.
That is a top priority, yes, sir.
The top priority.
I would say the top priority, yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Because it's not only I deeply appreciate that. That's important for the public to hear. I also want to be sure with my friend Henry Cuellar here, my good friend Judge Carter, our new chairman. Congratulations, Mr. Chairman. That we to reiterate and to reinforce the terrific partnership that we have in Texas with Mexico, the long history we have, the friendships we have, Henry, the work that we've done over the years, Judge Carter. Look forward to working with you and continuing to strengthen a very successful initiative in Congressman Cuellar's district that we've supported in a bipartisan way, Operation Streamline, to no better way to ensure public safety than to enforce the law. It's working beautifully, and I wanted to ask you if you could to talk about the expansion of Operation Streamline and working with Congressman Cuellar, Judge Carter, and I, and the Texas delegation in ensuring that the law is enforced, obviously with a common sense and a human heart, but that the law is enforced so that it is the first time 6 months, second time 2 years, as as they've done so successfully in the Del Rio sector and in the Laredo sector. If you talk to us about working with us and making sure that we expand that very successful program, Operation Streamline, up and down the border, starting with Texas.
Well, I think Streamline may have actually started in Arizona, if I might. However, it's a very good program. It's been effective. There are other, we call them consequence delivery programs, because there should be a consequence for breaking the law and immigrating illegally. But there are others that are similar to Streamline that we think are also very promising and don't take up as much judicial time. But yeah, I would say that Operation Streamline is very helpful.
And I hope you'll look to Judge Ludlam and her work in the Del Rio sector as a role model for that. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.